Hello, friends. So, I wanted to talk to you about Saturn in retrograde. So, Saturn just went in retrograde on July 13th, and this month we actually have three retrograde planets. So, Neptune already went in retrograde earlier this month, Saturn went in retrograde yesterday, and Mercury will be going in retrograde in just a few days. So I will talk about Mercury retrograde later, but for those who are not familiar with Saturn retrograde, I just wanted to kind of do a quick video to go over what that means. I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to use some notes so that I don't miss anything important. So I'll go over these notes and then I'll give a brief discussion of possible themes with Saturn in Aries going back into Pisces. Okay, so Saturn is the planet of rules, responsibility, structure, discipline, longevity. So Saturn in retrograde is having us follow through on existing commitments and responsibilities. It wants us to tie up loose ends and to follow through on what we've promised. But I'll be honest, things could feel like a bit of a slog, especially if you've been putting something off and putting it off and just kind of, you know, putting it on the back burner. You may be forced to kind of address it now. And also for those who don't have personal planets that are, I'm sorry, personal transits that are energizing you right now, like if you don't, then you may feel that heaviness of Saturn because it can be a little bit of a heavy planet to deal with. If you're launching a new business or have just launched a business, you could be dealing with more red tape and more bureaucracy. And you may find that either during the retrograde or after it ends, it's basically going from July to through November. You may find that you have to make some structural changes or developmental changes. Maybe you didn't have all the information and some new information comes in that means that you have to sort of restructure things or reorient your business. And some people may feel like they're in limbo. So, like I mentioned, things feeling like a slog. You may feel like you're spinning your wheels and you can't make good progress on your goals. Whereas those who've been really on top of their commitments and have been very organized may find that this just means you need to put more attention to details and get things squared up. Now, a few of you, I'll be honest, you may have been organized and on top of things, but you're dealing with other people who are not. So maybe you've fulfilled your end of a project and now you're waiting on someone else to complete their end. And there could be delays or frustrations while you're waiting for them to finish their part. So that could be extra frustrating, especially, if you're like a Virgo. Mars has been in Virgo. And if you have been super organized, but other people are not, you may get pretty irritated because you're having to be stuck on someone else's schedule when you're the organized one. So, in general, this Saturn retrograde is a time of learning where to put your focus. So, we can't always be focused on the fun and the exciting parts of a relationship or a project or a job. You know, if we want it to last, we have to put the work in. And sometimes that work is just not fun. It's not exciting. It's very tedious and mundane. And so this is just that reminder that sometimes you just have to put the work in if you want it to last. And this may test our commitment. If we say that something is important to us, if we make promises to do it, are we going to honor that commitment? Are we going to try to get it done? Or are we going to keep putting it off and avoiding it? And I'll be honest with you, when dealing with Saturn and Pluto, if you put it off, avoid, you could experience tough consequences for doing that. If you don't have like a really valid reason to be putting something off, like, obviously family emergency or something that's significant like that, that's one thing. But if you're just putting it off to put it off, then Saturn and Pluto tend to exact a little bit harder of a consequence when you're doing that. So just be mindful of that, that you really have to um, watch what you're committing yourself to. And also for people who maybe are people pleasers, maybe you're someone who wants to be helpful to everyone and you overcommit yourself. So Saturn in retrograde could be showing you, look, you have taken on way too much onto your plate. You cannot sustain this. It's not feasible. It's not viable to keep doing this. You need to set boundaries. Speaking of which, because Saturn is going from Aries back into Pisces, and Pisces is a sign of no boundaries. It's the sign where we merge with the collective, where we tap into our higher being or to God, deities, what have you. It's the place where we become one with the universe. And so it's a sign that doesn't particularly like boundaries. Boundaries are fluid. They don't really like exist in the same way when we're in the midst of Pisces as they do in other signs, right? So, Saturn in Aries is good at setting boundaries, but Saturn in Pisces is not, is reminding us of where we have not set boundaries. So, this could be something that comes up if you've been someone who has people pleasing tendencies. You could find yourself addressing issues in that regard and having to be a little bit more firm and saying no. No is an act of self care. And so it is important at times to be able to say no, even if it's a family member, even if it's a close friend. If you really can't do it and it's not just a laziness factor, then it's important to be able to set those boundaries so that you can have a healthy relationship and take good care of yourself. So I hope that this was helpful. Oh, something's telling me I should continue with Saturn and Aries. So I forgot to mention that Saturn and Aries is not really a comfortable place for Saturn to be because Saturn likes rules and structure and responsibility. It likes organization. In Aries is a sign ruled by Mars, and it wants to go. It's like, why are we sitting here talking about it? Why are we making all these plans and just going over it ad nauseum? We should just go and do it. Like, get it done. We could be doing instead of talking about doing. And so there's this friction there because Saturn is normally a planet that likes to go slow. It likes to pay attention to detail. It likes, to be organized. And so when it's in Aries, it doesn't quite know what to do because it wants to move forward and just kind of target those goals and to be really ambitious because Saturn can be very ambitious. But what happens now is if you've rushed forward with Saturn in Aries, is you then have to build the foundation underneath that. You have to fill in those gaps. You have to do whatever work that might have been skipped in order to kind of get moving on the project. So now you might be dealing with the tedious details that were skipped by rushing forward with Saturn in Aries. So I hope that that is helpful. Grounding is going to be very important, especially as Saturn goes back into Pisces, because Pisces can be a sign that isn't always grounded because your head is filled with lots of like ideas. There's a lot of creative spiritual energies that are just swirling around and your mind is just going into that. And so Saturn requires us to ground. It requires us to center ourselves and not to ignore the visions and dreams and spiritual energies that are happening, but to come at that from a place of calm and grounding rather than a chaotic place where you're unfocused. So I hope that's helpful for you. Check out my blog because I do cover twice a month the transits for the month, usually around the 1st and the 15th. So there'll be more information about what's coming up.